Hello and welcome to the podcast. We are the Cosmic Commentators and we're here to take a look at all aspects of religion, spirituality and metaphysics.
Hi, my name is Rachel and I'm here with the wonderful Alex. So thank you for joining us as we delve deep into the vast subject of life beyond the veil.
Hi Rachel.
Hi Alex.
It's been a while.
It has been a while.
It sure has.
There's been lots going on, hasn't there? Life has been going on energetically. There've been loads of stuff happening, hasn't there? Planetary. We've had the alignment of the seven planets. That hasn't happened. I know, not sure. It hasn't happened apparently in 300 years. So, yeah, energetically and just generally, it seems very full on, doesn't it?
Like you said, trudging through treacle.
That is kind of a little bit where I'm at the moment, yes. It is somewhat intense.
Intense is the word, yes. And but very interesting.
Yeah. I think watching it all unveil is quite astonishing.
Well, 2025 is apparently the year.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, the number 9.
Number 9, ending of cycles.
New one beginning. Yeah.
Anyway, we digress. What are we going to talk about today?
Well, I think we have to start focusing on the telepathy tapes.
The telepathy tapes, yeah.
They were pretty incredible, weren't they?
Yeah, so this episode is inspired by the telepathy tapes, so we'll leave a link in the description. A fascinating, what would you call it? It's like a case study, really, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was an experiment, really, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And it was fascinating. I mean, they are lengthy, aren't they?
They are lengthy.
I think they're about an hour each, and there's up to 8 or 9.
I think there's 2. They're on series 2 now. There's series 2 started.
Okay, so there's a little bit of a time commitment to them. Yeah. But what I like about how they present the information is they kind of work on a case by case, don't they? So you could listen to 1 or 2, and you don't necessarily have to listen to all of them. Yeah. But I just, as I said, I found it fascinating. I think for me and you, we've had personal experiences of this, not to the same degree. No. But definitely I started to reflect a lot around kind of some of the previous work we've done. And I think it'd be great to kind of explore that a little bit.
Definitely. So the Telepathy Tapes is a YouTube podcast series about people with non-verbal autism that display some sort of supernatural, otherworldly abilities. And as Rachel said before, we've both experienced them with varying different degrees. Yeah. So should we start with the young man that we used to work with at the hospital, do you think?
I think so. I think it'd be really good. And I think we can start linking into what obviously these researchers found, because I think when you start listening to them, there was so much controversy, really, wasn't there, around, and I think they are amazing to listen to. I found it quite emotional to listen to the tapes as well, and I think something that shone through for me is just that human spirit and the parents of these. They weren't children; they were kind of young adults, weren't they? Just the fight that they had to go through for anyone to listen to what they were experiencing. And I mean, there's it follows, I think, about 5 main characters, doesn't it? As you go through, and there's little bits of overlap. But each of them, just how, and it was generally a parent, a mother, really, that they engaged telepathically with. Yeah. But it's pretty fascinating, isn't it, what they could do?
Groundbreaking.
I mean, they could read minds.
Absolutely.
And and I know we're going to come on to language and words in another episode, because I think it'll probably link quite nicely to it. But the fact that, people completely dismissed these parents, and they were saying, there's nothing, almost they're an empty shell. Wasn't it kind of what they were saying? And I think, again, for some of the patients we've worked with, there was that kind of a perception of them as well, wasn't it?
Definitely.
That, they were just kind of
messed up.
It was all behavioural. There was nothing inside of them. They didn't really have much to give to the world. Yeah. And I know I know we had talked about it, didn't we? A very long time. And even when we were working with this individual. And something that sticks in my mind is you saying to me one day, you know, working with this patient, this is what I know unconditional love to be.
For real.
Isn't it? And I'm like, and then you said something like, that was his purpose on this planet, is to teach us how to love somebody unconditionally, because no matter what the behaviors we saw, which could have been challenging at times, there was just a real...
There was always forgiveness, wasn't there?
Always forgiveness. And there was a love.
It wasn't just, you know, getting a slap across the face, was it? It was some quite destructive, dangerous behaviour, wasn't it? I mean, I had my nose broken by this individual. That just gives you sort of a taste of this individual that we're talking about. But he was so lovable.
Oh, absolutely.
At the same time.
And I think, as I remember when we used to sit doing our case discussions after an event and these
debrief.
Yes, a debrief. And they were, as you said, they were serious incidents, you know, as you said, they weren't a slap. They were people having ribs broken. As you said, you got your nose broken, and people having, you know, fingers nearly bitten off and stuff. And while we all sat there and we could see the severity of this, I remember at the end of all of it, as we discussed it and we kind of try and identify what triggered him and whatever, we always went, oh, but we love him. He's adorable. And you're thinking, this is a very big, physically strong man. And we're all going, he's adorable.
We did love him. We did love him.
We absolutely loved him. And as I was listening to the tapes, I mean, obviously he came to my mind as almost as soon as with the researchers started to kind of talk through the cases, you know, the behaviors of those that they researched. And I suppose for me, I looked at it from two angles. I looked at it from, obviously, a researcher. Obviously, I'm a researcher myself at times and have published. So I could see it from the experimental scientific side of it. Yeah. And then being part of it and loving somebody who behaved in that way. You can almost, I saw the parental side as well.
Yeah, yeah.
And as I said, it you know, they are truly fascinating tapes to listen to. And I think when we got to the end of it, I think despite the fact it was incredible to listen to and the skills and the gifts of these individuals, just as you said, were just groundbreaking. But I felt a sadness at the end, not necessarily inclusive of the fact that obviously some of them had passed on.
Yeah, very young.
Very young. But also, for me, there was a sadness for the researcher who said, this will never be accepted in the scientific world. No. And I'm like, oh, and this isn't just a week of work. This is years and years, isn't it? Yeah. Of work and, you know,
documentation and
absolutely. And they employed neurologists who checked brain activity. You know, it was so thorough in everything that was done, and the fact and they went through all of that, you know, and the person who documents that, you know, she's like, I went out and I went to the supermarket and I bought all this new stuff, so, you know, there was no bias and there was no way it could be fabricated. And despite all of that, you know, it'll never be truly accepted.
No, but I mean, you know, science is not doing so well, is it? Like, you know, recently in the last few years with what we've been told to trust the science. And the science has clearly failed us, hasn't it? So,
it has.
You know, are we entering a new sort of paradigm, a new age where could this be, you know, the beginning of that? Who knows? Yeah. Who knows? But we've definitely had our experiences.
Yes.
Would you like to tell the audience about the, you know, the one where the person that we're talking about trashed the room and you'd...
Oh, absolutely. So that was... So, and I think, again, getting back to the tapes, I think although this individual, this person that we were talking about, he had language.
Limited, wasn't it?
Yeah. We've talked about this morning, didn't we? And while he he was extremely intelligent around, you know, being able to pronounce words, and spell them. I think as we talked this morning, we never really had fluid conversations with him, did we?
No, but once you understood him and you understood his way of communication, it was very, very fluent.
Absolutely.
And you knew exactly what he wanted and what he needed.
Absolutely.
And that's, you know, where he taught us.
Yeah.
He taught us his language.
And what I loved about it is he made us join him rather than him conforming to societal.
He wasn't coming to our side.
No
was
chance.
It's like, you have to come to my side on my terms. And
absolutely.
I don't know about you, but I was more than happy to do that.
Oh, 100%.
I felt blessed to do that.
Yeah. And I remember when I first started working with him, I was advised, you know, women don't work with this individual. Do you remember? That was the thing.
That was the rule.
That was the rule.
No women.
No women. Yeah. No, you're not coming in here. And I was like, okay, well, let's just see what happens. And it was just, I don't know, I was always drawn to him.
Me too.
And I remember even, it's quite funny because we had talked about this we chatted and we said there's something very spiritual about him and he's so intuitive. And then when you sent me the link for these tapes, I'm like, cha-ching. We'd always said it, but there was kind of nothing to back up what we were saying.
Yeah.
So we did obviously you spent far more time with him than I ever did, but I always felt you could just feel his energy and it was so strong. And I felt I had a tie with him.
Mm-hmm. I think you definitely did.
And, you know, we were just smiling this morning, weren't we, when we were talking about, you know, we were sitting in the garden and he's just roaming around doing his own thing. But he always came back and just sat with us. And language was never required. No. It was just, I think we all just engaged on an energetic level.
Absolutely.
And it was really, really beautiful because when we think about it, when we start using language, things get complicated.
They do get complicated. And things can get misconstrued with language when you're operating sort of energetically. It's authentic, it's honest.
Absolutely.
Again, this guy that we're talking about, you would never lie to him because he would know, even if you were trying to protect him from something that would trigger him, he would know that you were lying, you know, would have a behavior because he just knew from your energy or something that you were lying to him and he didn't like it. So there wasn't room, was there, for anything to be misconstrued or any deception because you would probably get your nose broken.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing was, it took him a long time to accept you into his...
It was all about trust, wasn't it?
Absolutely. I'm kind of saying almost his auric field. Because I think, you know, there was some never got near it.
Yeah.
And he would use violence. Let's be fair, that's what it was, to keep you out. But for those who kind of he felt safe with, eventually, again, he kind of tested that trust, didn't he?
Yeah.
And you got into that field.
Yeah.
Then... I felt like there was an invisible bond or a thread that
definitely, and that
was unbreakable.
That was his whole thing. Wasn't it trust? It was all about, you know, in this person's care plan. It was a lot about building a relationship of trust with him, and that was very important to this particular individual. And as the telepathy tape sort of testifies, they know who genuinely loves them and who doesn't.
Absolutely,
and that's where the bond was created through just
100%.
that. I've got your back. There's nothing that you can do that can make me walk away from you. And then that's how you do it. That's how you build these bonds.
And from a psychological perspective, I didn't do anything psychologically focused with him.
Yeah.
I literally sat with him.
And just accepted him.
Yeah. And he'd rub my feet. He had a foot fetish. And that was it. And he wasn't. And the thing was, he was getting my feet, whether I was standing or on the floor. So, and we came to that agreement. That I was like, gentle, you know, let's just sit here.
Did he twang your socks as well? He loved the socks, didn't he?
He did. Yeah, Rob. But I think because of that, and there was that level of trust, and I was quite, and I know, you know, staff that probably didn't know him very well were like, "Oh no, Rach,
well, there's a lot
stand
of fear
back.
around him.
Stand back! No, he's going to hurt you." I'm like, he won't. Yeah. I know he won't. And he'd smile, and
you could feel it, couldn't you?
He'd be down on his hands and knees, and he'd be rubbing my feet, and it was okay. I never had an issue.
Yeah.
And I think because of that, I think, as I said, that bond was so strong, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And then I left. You know, I obviously had finished that, and I moved on to another career setting. And I remember just having this intensity in my head, and I knew it wasn't my pain, if that makes sense. I knew it was someone else's, and it takes. I mean, it doesn't come straight. It doesn't come instantaneous to me. I'm like, oh, that's it. But I remember thinking, oh, eventually I was like, oh, I know what that is. I know what that is. And I remember texting you.
Yeah.
Because you were working with him.
I was still working
You were
with
still
him.
there. And I remember saying, what's wrong with him? Something's happened. And on that day, he had
a huge incident.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where
massive.
we had to have the police involved. You know, we'd lost control. We'd lost control of the unit where we were, basically.
Yeah.
And it was that was the worst I've seen. To be fair. And you kind of knew that. And
I knew that.
How do you know that? How do you know that? Why are you asking me about this?
Yeah,
person?
I know.
Crazy.
I was like, whatever, 60 miles away, and we hadn't had previous discussion. I mean, we did, but you know, he wasn't part of our discussion, so it's not as if I was thinking, oh, there's been a build up.
Yeah.
It kind of, but it was, and the intensity, and I kept sensing, and I think I said to you, what's going on with his head? There's some issue with his head today.
Yeah, you perceived like a pain, didn't you? In
absolutely, his head? And I mean, again, we will never know because he could never distinguish, could he? He was never able to identify or distinguish pain. But yeah, that was, oh man, that was really intense, and it stayed around for, I would say, good 48 hours.
Really?
So whatever had, I felt I couldn't unattach from him.
Yeah,
I felt, you know, that, and it's not. And when I say this, it doesn't. It's not as if it's a, oh my God, I'm being almost taken over by his pain. That wasn't. But I knew.
But he was communicating that to you.
Absolutely,
Like
I am in pain.
towards
I
you.
am in pain. On my head, there's something not right with my head. And it was just bizarre.
Well, that particular incident, it came out of nowhere. I mean, I'd asked him that morning. I think it was a Saturday. It was a Saturday morning when it happened, and it was in October. And we'd asked him if he wanted to go out for a drive and go get, you know, a McDonald's or whatever, which he agreed to. And then I left the room to go get everything ready, and he just
Bang.
went like absolutely crazy. There was, you know, normally with this person there would be a trigger, wouldn't there? You know, somebody had said something, or there'd be a physical trigger, wouldn't there? There'd be some kind of trigger, but you know, for him to sort of present at baseline, and completely sort of calm, and then agree to do something that he enjoyed, and then just change like that. Something had happened there, something quite serious, and then to have an incident of that sort of magnitude, where we'd have to call in the police, even though
which was a rarity. And I know his violence could be intense, but it was very. Was that the first time? It was
no, I think,
but it was very rare.
Called at one time, I think. The year previously, or in the summer or something like that. But I mean, what can the police do? The police can't communicate with him.
No, and in fact, it actually exacerbates the situation.
It just exacerbated it,
Oh, and always had, and because obviously in previous situations, it had never been.
And because we'd lost control of the situation, because there wasn't enough staff to intervene, and because normally with this person, if we'd sort of intervene, we could sometimes stop it, couldn't we?
Yeah.
9 out of 10, 9 out of 10 times, if we just said, right, that's enough. But because of the nature of this person, a lot of people wouldn't come. And
I understand.
We were short-staffed, so.
And I completely understand, because actually, when you saw this individual go, it was scary.
Very scary.
It was, and I think we talked about it before. When he hit that level of intensity, he couldn't self-regulate. He needed someone to regulate that for him, i.e., unfortunately, it was a restraint. That was the only way of helping him to come down.
And for him to feel safe as well, wasn't it?
And also I think the pressure of the restraint, because he was very tactile as well, wasn't he?
Yeah.
I think having that pressure, particularly shoulders were big for him as well, wouldn't they? If you had that pressure on the shoulders, it kind of really did help calm him.
But on this particular day, we just had to let him burn himself out.
Yeah.
And it went on for just over an hour until he'd just completely exhausted himself. And then we were able to enter the room and, sort of, it was, nurse him really, because he'd injured himself as well as, other things. And
And it's really distressing to see.
Really distressing,
to see somebody. I mean, it's distressing for him, obviously, clearly, but to observe that is highly distressing to watch.
Yeah, and it was like when he went, it was like something else took over.
Yeah,
it wasn't him, and the people that he did have a good connection with, he just hated him in that moment. Yeah. I mean, I remember him throwing glass at me and doing these, and I was the one that he liked the most.
Sure, but I think there was almost a sense of help me, and when you don't help me, I'm angry with you. Yeah. And I don't believe he would use emotions in that way.
No.
Because I don't believe. I think he had his own emotional spectrum. I really do.
Yeah, yeah.
But
his
I think
set of rules.
Absolutely, and I think in that moment he was like, help me to calm and help me to stop him. We were just not able to do that at times.
Well, as I say, if we'd had more people, we could have intervened. But once you got to a certain point, it's too dangerous to intervene.
Absolutely.
When there's radiators coming off walls and glass being hurled around, we've lost control at that point. But it was just so interesting how you sort of instinctively knew, because it wasn't like you say, you didn't message me every day and say, oh, how is X, whatever.
Yeah. And it hadn't. And I don't believe we'd spoken about it
in a while. In a long time.
But as soon as I got this intensity, I'm like, oh, wow, what is that? And I think when you get that and you kind of have to decipher, is it mine? And then I was like, oh no, this isn't mine. I know who this is.
But you knew who
instantly.
It was. You asked me, how is...
Yeah.
And well, actually, we've just had
how do you know?
Huge incident.
Yeah. And I think, as you said, linking back to the telepathy tapes, it's like when these individuals go to the hill.
The hill.
Which is literally a
hub almost, a spiritual hub.
A hub where they just...
congregate.
Consciously.
It's just in a non-physical way. And they chat and they relax together.
Yeah.
And they enjoy each other's space in this sort of non-physical.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, incredible. And they all can do it. And not all from, different parts of the world. They're all congregating in this one place.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's just, I'm like, and I do believe it 100%. I believe it happens, but I had to rewind and go, hold on, did I hear all of this? And so literally, as you said, from different parts of the world, they're
all congregating
on a conscious level, isn't it? So they're all sitting in their own bedrooms, spread around the world, and then they join this conscious hub called the Hill, where they communicate telepathically, and they talk about what they've been doing, and it's incredible, isn't it? And again, there was that other situation where two of them were in a relationship, and when one of them left, they were like, been a fantastic date. They were never in the same room.
No.
One was upstairs, one was downstairs as well. And I'm like,
and
wow.
There was one case where I think it was a staff member or somebody that worked with them actually accessed the hill themselves. They saw the hill, and the people saw this person on the hill, and they said, oh yes, whatever his name was has been there as well. And it's like, so we can't access this place, we can access this place
of course.
And they seem to have access to what you call the Akashic records.
Yes.
Which is very interesting.
Yeah. But I have seen a spiritual guru who has access to Akashic records as well. But that is a very high level of, and we can do it as humans. We can, obviously the non-verbals are humans as well. We have the ability. Yeah. It's just that level of consciousness is something that you have to practice and you have to work on. And but it is achievable.
Definitely. I think the people with this sort of non-verbal autism that, sort of appear to be lacking sort of physically or, socially, their mind is in that place.
Absolutely.
And that's how they are doing this, because they say some people, they don't even know that they aren't aware that they've got hands and feet and limbs.
Sure.
So the bigger part of them, which is in the non-physical, their focus is with that bigger part in non-physical, and there's just a small bit of the focus that's here in this body, which, is absolutely
But don't you think that the majority of humans now, we're far too focused on the physical appearance and less on
and in the physical world,
we are contained.
We're focused here, aren't we? Which we're supposed to be. We're incarnate, so we are supposed to be focused here. But I think these guys give us that sort of bridge to that, and they show us in a way that's not scientific, which I love.
Yes, no, and me, and I think, as I said, having that experience, which we both have, and I think it'd be good to tell them the situation with the bus.
Yeah.
Listening to the tapes, I'm like, that's what it was. That's how.
That's how they're doing it. That's how they're doing it. And then it just confirms these different things, doesn't it? Because how many times have you just thought about somebody, then they call you, or you just know something that you shouldn't know, and it's an ability that I think everybody have. And we were talking about the Tartarians.
Yes.
Tartarians,
yes.
That they were potentially able to do this.
Well, I think, yes. And, from what I've read, I mean, there's lots of controversy around whether they were an actual civilization. But what I've read, I'm edging my bets more that they did exist than they didn't. And again, they were a highly advanced, highly spiritual civilization where language was, I'm actually not even sure they had language. I think it was all telepathic communication. They lived in a very caring, loving environment. As you said, they were highly advanced. There was free electricity, they hovercrafts, they had everything,
heaven on earth.
It was heaven on earth, absolutely. And
then
there is just
happened.
And then all of a sudden they were just wiped out. Interesting, isn't it?
Very interesting.
Yeah, and it's something maybe we could do a deep dive into.
Yeah,
what came prior, and then maybe some of the discussions around why this particular civilization was
eradicated.
Absolutely, it was gone.
Yeah.
And even again, it's like even if there was some skepticism around it, how have we never heard about this in our history books?
True. Yeah.
But that's definitely another topic.
Well, I mean, the people that write the history are the ones in control, aren't they?
Absolutely. His story,
yeah. And it's normally the victors of any kind of battle that write the history.
Absolutely.
So,
the victor,
answer.
yeah. The victor, wrote his story. And we accept it. Well, we don't.
Course, well, we don't, but that's all you're told, isn't it? So,
Yes.
I think, yeah. Anyway, we digress.
As always.
As always. We always do this, don't we? But I've had two experiences when I worked up in Scotland at an autism specific service. So I'll just tell you about them because these were very interesting. So there was a guy that had 30% vision and loved... he loved fire engines mainly. His things were fire engines. And I was out with him one day walking because he loved to go walking. We were walking down this very long straight road, and all of a sudden he starts to, when they stem and get excited, and he's like, Alex, fire engine. I was like, no fire engines. And this went on for a few minutes, and I was just like, well, I don't know what's going on here. And then literally 3 fire engines back to back came down the road, no sirens on, and past us. And I was like, wow, you've seen these before they even got there, and you've had the emotional response because he got excited and was, trying to sort of self-regulate from his excitement that he'd seen these fire engines before they'd even materialized. And I was just like, wow, that was incredible.
Yeah. And I think as well, generally the people I would say complex autism, because the autism is flying left, right, and centre at the moment. Everyone's getting diagnosed. But that more complex autism, there's always a specific interest in something, isn't it?
A special interest, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're just so knowledgeable about that particular topic.
Yeah.
I find it fascinating.
Yeah, and it's just like a fire engine. Really quite interesting. And then there was another case where I'd taken this other guy, I'd taken him swimming for the day. So we're on public transport. Now this guy, even though he was verbal, he could speak, but again, it was sort of that limited sort of speech, wouldn't speak a lot, but would speak, but he hated anybody with a disability.
Oh.
Which was very, honestly, he couldn't stand them. We don't know why, but he didn't like them at all. And we were getting off he always liked to sit right at the back of the bus so we could sort of observe people, which, which is a very autistic trait. And as we were getting off the bus, we were walking down the aisle, and he taps this older guy on the shoulder and he says, "Hey, why don't you tell me your name?" And this guy turned around and he was like, I can't speak.
Oh, wow.
And I don't think he knew him. Because he wasn't somebody that was in services. He was just somebody that was another non-verbal person. And he berated him on this bus. And this is the first time I'd worked with this guy, so I didn't know how to sort of like reel him in, because everyone was staring at me on the bus, because he was going, "Look at this guy. He's got no voice. His voice has been disembodied." Just shaming this guy on the bus. And he was an old guy. But he clearly couldn't speak. And this guy that was working with knew that he had this disability, and he hated it. He just hated it. But from the back, he just knew that he got this sort of.
That's incredible that they have that connection. They have that knowing.
He just knew that he couldn't speak, and he said, "Hey, why don't you tell me your name?" Knowing that he couldn't do that, which is a wicked.
It is, and it's a weird statement to make initially, isn't it?
To somebody that's, also not, a non-verbal person, and it was just like, this guy. It was so embarrassing for me, and I was like, "Oh, get off the bus, get off the bus now," because everyone was sort of staring at you, going, "Control this," and he was a big guy, big guy to sort of control. And I got him off the bus, and I was just like, "Why did you say that?" And he just wouldn't answer me, but he knew that this guy had got this disability, and he was just going to shame him up on the bus in front of everybody, So, another very interesting behaviour that I observed. So, these things do seem to be real.
And I think when you listen to the tapes and you kind of hear the level of kind of the skills and the ability and all of that comes with it, I think had I not experienced it, I think it would be harder to just accept it. Yeah. And it is fascinating, and it is, while it's not unlikely to be scientifically accepted, it was scientifically conducted, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But I do think, had I not obviously had the experiences that I've done, I'd be like, not sure.
Yeah.
Could they have done this? Is this just a little bit? Yeah. And what I liked about the documentary, the person who's led it, she got quite skeptical people to work with her, didn't she? Yeah. And I think, if I can remember correctly, the sound man, again, didn't believe in any, and he completely 180 by the end, hadn't he? He had completely changed and gone, "No, actually, I so believe that this happens because I've witnessed it."
Yeah. I mean, I wonder if any of the people that we worked with went to the Hill.
It'd be interesting. We'd never know, because we never tried, did we? We never tried to talk to them telepathically, did we? So
no. I mean, the particular person that we both worked with, he always enjoyed his company of his staff, didn't he? He always wanted to be with his staff, and a lot of the time he had to be observed, didn't he, because of sort of the level of sort of danger and aggression. So I don't know if he did, and I wonder what would constitute those ones that do go to this Hill. What sort of criteria, sort of, either neurologically or spiritually, do they meet to sort of do that? Because I've worked with other non-verbal people before, and I've always had great relationships with people with autism, but I guess you say we would never know, would we? No. Because they could never tell you that.
No, absolutely not. Although, if you remember, there were times where he would look almost vacant. Do you remember particularly when he was sitting in that little desk he had? There were times he kind of, it was like he checked out, didn't it? So I'm wondering, I mean, he was definitely going, well, it felt like he was somewhere. But then I go, how do they know the Hill exists? You know, is it by invite, or how does that happen? I just found that fascinating. Again,
or do they just sort of find themselves there when they? I don't know. I mean, these are great questions, aren't they?
Yeah.
I'd love to interview people from the telepathy tapes and say, how'd you get to the hill? But that one guy did go there, didn't he? He said, oh yeah, we saw Chris, whatever his name, he was on the hill, he was there. So I'm wondering, what does the hill look like? It's so interesting.
Yeah.
I'd love to go to the hill.
I would too.
I would love it.
It'd be amazing, wouldn't it? But again, it's all frequency, isn't it?
Yeah.
So obviously, a lot of the time, you know, we're on a lower frequency because they're less connected to the physical.
They're less held down to
absolutely.
The physical,
And I think they were maybe oppressed by the physical.
Yeah,
We've used that word a lot this morning, haven't we? Because they're able to allow, or they're maybe less frightened.
Yeah.
To go with a higher frequency.
Yeah.
Maybe that kind of, because they're on that frequency for longer, maybe that's how they're kind of finding their tribe.
Maybe. And also, you know, when you hear about people that sort of go through abuse or trauma, and they'll say they'll leave the body and sort of they won't remember it because they'll go out of the body. So maybe there's been some sort of frustration or trauma that they've had where they've ended up going to this place. Yeah. And then they can easily get there through just sort of, you know, these traumatic events, which is possible because, you know, you hear about people having terrible things done to them, and they say they sort of leave the body, and it's just these things just happen into the body.
Oh, absolutely. And particularly because obviously I've worked quite extensively with victim survivors of sexual abuse, and a lot of them will say that they would disassociate in order because they just had to get out of it because they couldn't tolerate,
they couldn't endure it,
so they would literally just go elsewhere.
So and maybe that's what's happening. Or maybe it's just a natural thing that they've got because, as I say, they're not as focused in the meat suit as we are.
100%.
Yeah.
And I really want you to tell this story because, again, it's not just the connection that we had with this particular person. It's also the
kinetic.
Yes, and would you tell about when you?
Oh yeah.
You moved him to another placement. Because I think this is, again, incredible.
This is strange. So our hospital got closed down, didn't it, for whatever reason, and it was turned into another service. So all our patients had to be shipped out around the country to different services. So the particular guy that we worked with, he ended up in a medium secure unit. And it was so bad the way it was done because we weren't in control of it. We were sort of, get him up there, don't tell him that you're going to be staying with him. So we had to sort of like almost lie to him,
which never worked.
And constantly he was saying, because my colleague was called Matt, he was like, oh, Matt and Alex will keep me safe. And we kept having to reassure him, yes, we'll keep him safe. And when we transitioned him, I think we stayed up there for 5 days, and we said to the staff, this isn't long enough because he hasn't learned to trust anybody yet. He's still too reliant on me.
Of course.
And we begged and we pleaded with psychologists and the funding people and the hospital I work with and this particular hospital, please let us stay a bit longer. Because he's not ready to separate from us because he's too, you need to connect with him and get to know him.
And that took time.
It took me 6 months to sort of get any trust with him, and that was working 60, 70 hours a week with him, Absolutely. I mean, I dedicated 18 months of my life to this guy. And anyway, because of money, the root of all evil, it was denied. Mm-hmm. So we gave him half an hour's notice that we were leaving, which absolutely broke me. Yeah. He absolutely broke me. And when I couldn't tell him, I was like in tears, and I had to, my colleague had to tell him. And when we told him, he sort of just sat back, he said, we are leaving now. And he just sat back and he sort of put his head down, and I'll never forget that. And then he went to bed. And this was around about 12:30. And then we started the drive back home, which was a good sort of 5 hours. And interestingly, we were in an electric vehicle, these modern electric vehicles. It was a big transit van. And I think it was around about 3 o'clock-ish. I noticed the dashboard lights were one by one going off. Yeah. And I was like, what's going on? This electric vehicle seems to be losing its power.
Oh, surprise, surprise.
And we got to the point where the power steering had gone, and I was on the motorway, and I had to pull over, like a hard pull, because we'd lost power. A brand new van. It was literally 12 months old, which is just bizarre. So we get out of the van, and it's a freezing cold, like December day up north in England. So the snow was coming down, and it was a grim situation. So we called for assistance, and then we got a call from the hospital saying that he'd come out of his room and attacked 3 people and hospitalised all 3 of them.
I know.
And I was like, well, isn't that strange that he'd had a massive sort of incident?
Yeah.
And the 2 people that he was most connected to, their van just happened to lose power.
Absolutely.
Which, okay, so when people have experiences with, what you call UFOs or things like that, the camera will drain or the phone will drain.
Sure.
There's some sort of psychic energy that, and they say sort of spirit works through energy.
Absolutely.
And I just found an interesting correlation that the exact moment that our van lost complete power, within that time frame, he had attacked people. And as we'd stopped, a few minutes later, the hospital let us know that he'd come out and had a massive incident, and 3 people had subsequently ended up in the hospital because they hadn't followed what our guideline and said, this is going to end up really badly, and it did.
But now that you said, and I'm focusing on the word surge. When he went, it was like a surge of energy. It was like a surge of energy and electric. And you're like, whoa. And it was, honestly, it was palpable. Even if I wasn't on the unit, you'd feel that energy.
There's a kinetic
my God.
Wasn't it? It was
absolutely.
Kinesis almost, wasn't it?
It was 100%. And he had such an ability to connect with those he cared about and trusted.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was almost like a sort of, you've left me.
Yeah.
And he knew where we were.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was, I'm still connected to this guy now. I mean, I had a dream about him today, but that sort of, it was like a betrayal thing. It's like, and
he felt rejected.
He felt rejected. When I felt that's what we'd done.
Yeah, no, I completely agree.
And I felt terrible on the drive home. I'm sure my colleague did too, but I'm a much more emotional, person, and I was much more deeply connected. He was like my child, So to leave someone that you care about that much in a place with no one around him that knew him or loved him, Heartbreaking, and I think that connection came through the van or something, and it
absolutely
the van broke down, and then we had to be,
But helped. I think as we were talking, and we do talk about him a lot, don't we? Because we both feel very connected to him. I don't think that connection will ever stop unless we consciously sever it.
Yeah, I think that's the way.
And even now, every now and then, I kind of do tap into his energy.
I send him love all the time.
Absolutely, and I do think he's doing quite well. I mean, there'll always be blips,
yeah.
But I think, I do think he's in a good place.
I hope so, and I hope you have this sort of blessing to work with him again, because he was my life for 18 months.
Yeah, he was.
Absolutely loved him.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
As we all did, didn't we?
Sure, 100%.
But you did teach unconditional love, because I've never felt that before. No matter what you do, once I've calmed down.
I think we all needed that debrief after. He
had
one of his moments. Yeah.
Very dramatic.
But yeah, as I said, I think it was. The tapes were incredible to listen to, but it was nice to, as I was listening to them, reminisce about. Yeah. Having that connection with him as well, and kind of, I suppose it kind of again just clicked together a little bit. I'm like, that makes sense, and that's why these happen, because you do question yourself, don't you?
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, maybe not, and then I'm like, let me just text Alex and just see. Yeah. Oh yes, correct. Yeah.
But I mean, as you say, you've only been on this sort of spiritual journey for a few years, haven't you? You know what I mean? So there's a lot to sort of take in, especially if you've been more physically focused than not. And
I keep having to recalibrate myself and question myself, and it doesn't always come easy, because my background is science,
psychology
and science, isn't it? And a researcher, and I'm like, oh, this isn't something that is.
It's a paradigm shift, isn't it? It's a paradigm.
It's not it's not readily to be able to document it. So it's very interesting. But I think it is definitely one I would encourage people to listen to. It's very interesting. And I think it just gives us another aspect about
human consciousness.
What amazing individuals we are.
Yeah.
When we choose to connect with that.
Yeah.
And I think everything we talk about has a spiritual element, isn't it?
Yeah.
And again, you we could go off on another tangent, which we won't, but I'm just thinking, when we talk about hitting the third eye and the crown chakra, this is where people connect on those levels of consciousness, isn't it?
Definitely.
And because particularly non-verbal autistic people,
they have to use it that way, don't they? Because
absolutely.
There's no other.
But they're less in the lower vibrations.
Yeah, yeah, and they have to find other ways to communicate and stimulate themselves, don't they? So, say for example, somebody that's blind would be a great pianist or something.
Yes.
One sense is dulled where another one is heightened.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, it makes sense.
So we would definitely recommend you listening to the tapes. Just fascinating. As I said, they are quite long, aren't they? There is a bit of a time commitment to them, but as you said, you can kind of just listen to one episode at a time, which I did. And it's just really fascinating. And we hope you have enjoyed kind of learning a little bit more about kind of what's on the tapes, but also our experience of working with, as I said, beautifully gifted, intelligent,
unique people.
Oh, absolutely. And highly intuitive.
Highly intuitive, yeah, definitely. So with that, I guess we'll wrap it up. And I hate saying this, but please like, share, and subscribe if you feel compelled to. And we'll see you for the next time on the next episode. So ciao for now.
Bye.